be up against a leopard seal. I mean, they are frightening as hell. Well, here is their range in Antarctica. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is one of the most beautiful birds in the world. It is the Gyrfalcon. Now, Gyrfalcons are the largest members of the Falcon family. And when I say the largest, I mean a fully grown female, because in birds of prey, the females are always bigger than the males. A fully grown female can have a wingspan of just over 1.5 meters and can weigh over 2 kilograms, which is even bigger than their peregrine cousins. But, like peregrines, they can dive at 200 miles per hour, but unlike a peregrine, they can even catch prey in flat-out flight. And interesting facts about the Gyrfalcon is back in the medieval era, when during the high period of falconry, only the king was allowed to fly the Gyrfalcon along with the golden eagle. But that's a story for another day. Anyway, Gyrfalcons tend to live in the Arctic regions, like in northern Canada and northern Europe and Russia. And they feed on all kinds of things. I mean, they do feed on birds, such as seabirds, like auks, razorbills, guillemots, gulls. But they also feed on waterfowl like ducks, geese, and even grouse like ptarmigan. But they can even catch small mammals as big as Arctic hares. I first came across the Gyrfalcon when I was around about 7, when I watched a Natural World documentary about a pair of Gyrfalcons on Ellesmere Island in the high Arctic of Canada. And of course I've been absolutely mesmerised by this bird ever since. I mean, they are probably my second favourite bird and one of my favourite animals. And like peregrines, they nest on rugged cliffs, usually around the sea, and that's where they can raise their chicks, because they usually have like 2 or 4 broods, 2 or 4 chicks in one season. And quite often it's the male who will go off and find food while the female protects and feeds the chicks, but they do take it in turns, unlike what a lot of people think, that quite often they think that the father does all the work, when actually the female does help out with the hunting. Like if the male needs a break from hunting, the female will go off and hunt for him. Of course, how they hunt prey is either like their peregrine cousins, they will dive right at their prey at 200 miles per hour, quite often right behind the sun, so their prey can't see them, and then bang! Or they can quite often chase prey in a flat-out chase, and because they're a lot stronger than their peregrine cousins, it means that they can quite often keep up with prey on the flats much easier than them. And of course, they're not endangered at all. There are thousands, if not millions of them in the Arctic Circle. And they have occasionally been seen coming to Britain in the north of Scotland, but that is, they are a very rare visitor, and they aren't always seen. But one of the best places to see them is, sorry about that, one of the best places to see them, in fact, is Ellesmere Island, which I will talk about in a moment. Of course, here is the range of the Gyrfalcons. You can see they're found in much of the Arctic Circle, even in Canada and the northern states of the USA. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you of the Arctic is probably the most incredible predator. It is the orca, or killer whale. These are, as I said about pods, and of course that's a family unit, and of course that's because in Antarctica there are more killer whales there than anywhere else on Earth, and they all specialise in hunting different prey. The first one, Antarctic type A's, Antarctic type A's, they mostly specialise in hunting seals, with like whittle seals, crab-eater seals, and how they do it is actually very, very incredible. What they do is they find a seal that's lying out on an ice floe, and then together in perfect synchrony they swim right underneath the ice floe and cause a bow wave which can either break the ice or wash the seal off the ice floe and into the water. And then the killer whales will need to try and grab their prey by the tail while avoiding its snapping jaws. And then, once they've got a hold of the seal, they will pull it down and drown it. And the second orca pod, Antarctic type B's, and they're a lot bigger than the others, and they specialise in hunting whales. To be precise, Antarctic minke whales. And of course, the Antarctic minke whales come into the Antarctic Peninsula during the summer to feed on krill, and how the Antarctic type B's catch minke whales is by using teamwork. So when they find a lone minke whale, they will chase after it, and then, of course, the minke's only defence is endurance, because it has a pointed head and short dorsal fin, so it has speed and endurance, but this is where the orca's teamwork comes into play. As they hunt as a team like wolves, because that's another name that killer whales are known by, is sea wolves. And how they do it is they have outriders on each flank of the minke whale to block off any escape routes, and of course they have others replace the outriders in relays, and then once the minke is exhausted, there will be battering and biting, and then they will all join forces to drown the minke whale, and then they can feed. Antarctic type C's, of course, they're a little bit smaller in stature to the others, and they're built especially to hunt penguins, and mainly emperor and gentoo penguins. And gentoo penguins are probably the fastest penguins in the sea. They can swim at about 22 miles per hour, and they're very agile, and so the killer whales need to work as a team, so just have two on each side to block off any escape routes, and then they have to try and outmaneuver the penguin. And if it gets if the penguin makes a mistake, then the killer whales will grab a hold of it, and of course that will mean it'll be game over for the penguin. Because even against like 4 or 5 killer whales, the penguin will stand little chance. And Antarctic type D's, and those ones are specialists in catching fish. Of Because that's the thing about the killer whale pods in Antarctica and why there's so many of them there. Because they all specialise in hunting different kinds of prey, so they don't compete and they can coexist. And of course, orca got the name killer whales mainly in the 1860s when a whaling captain witnessed a pod of killer whales killing a whale and described them as spreading death, and the name killer whale was brought into fruition. While they're commonly believed to be whales because of their size, they're actually not whales at all. Orca are actually the largest species of dolphins, and when I say the largest, I mean a fully grown male can be over 8 meters long, weigh as much as 2 elephants, and they can take on prey as big as a blue whale, which is absolutely phenomenal. And of course, they all come from the line of the mother, and that's usually the matriarch, who's the leader of the group. And males will stay with their family pod for much of their lives. And in fact, a male, how you tell the males apart is their dorsal fin, which can be more than 2 meters high. So it's the largest dorsal fin of any animal. Of course, here is a way you can tell the different pods in Antarctica apart. Of course, they all have different body shapes, different colours, different eye spots, and different shaped dorsal fins. And that is their range. Now, the next animals I'm going to show you are some of the most incredible animals, but also the voice of the wilderness. It is the wolf. To be precise, the Arctic wolf. Arctic wolves are a gene of grey wolf that live in the Arctic Circle, because they're a little bit smaller than a grey wolf, with smaller ears, shorter tails, and of course, as you can see, they usually have white fur. And where they live in the Arctic, and it can be a very difficult place to live, and of course, but in fact there's actually one remote corner of the planet, which is Ellesmere Island in the Canadian Arctic, and the wolves there have no fear of human beings. And of course, while wolves are always portrayed in many myths and folklores as the bad guys, this animal's playful and curious nature does not agree with the stories of a solitary, sadistic, murderous killer, as all wolves are quite often portrayed as. And as I mentioned, on Ellesmere Island in the high Arctic, the wolves there have no fear of humans, and that's mainly down to the fact that they've never seen people before and they've never been hunted by us, so they have no fear of us at all, which makes them both curious and inquisitive, and it can even make them just a little bit dangerous, because where they live on Ellesmere, it's very hard to live because food is scarce and they quite often have to take anything they can find, and if they get the chance, they could attack people, but that is very, very rare. And the only time it happens is if they're incredibly hungry, or if they're frightened, cornered, or protecting pups. And in many parts of the Arctic, a lot of what they feed on is caribou, which are right here. And caribou are the Arctic's most specialised species of deer, and in fact a place in northern Canada in the Arctic, caribou make the longest land migration of any animal. And It's there that, of course, about 10 million of them